So it's 5 past. Is everyone happy if we start? Yep. Okay. So welcome to all of you. There's 73 of us. It's wonderful. Thank you for setting aside time to join us today. There seems to be at least a mild interest in the subject of fairness. So let's get started. My name is Liam Bitar. I'm the chair of DVD, the German Association of Freelance Translators and Interpreters. And I'm also a member of the FIT Europe Working Group on Fair Work Practices. We're a relatively young group. The working group was established last year at the Athens annual meeting of FIT Europe. And this is actually our first event, so we're very excited to be putting this together. And if all goes well, it won't be our last. So before we dive into the discussion, let me share two things. First, I'd like to give you a rough outline of what we have planned for today. And then I'd like to share a couple of housekeeping items. Okay, so in terms of our agenda, after we've ticked off the housekeeping items, I'll introduce you to a collaborative document that we've got prepared. I'll say more on that in a moment. We'll have a short introduction round and hear some initial thoughts on what our panelists think about what fairness could be, just to get us started. And then we'll hear from Patrick from Fair Work about their research and about their translation and transcription platforms ratings. And we'll move on to hear from Diego what his experience was in working with Fair Work. And then we'll hear from Heike and from Anya about their experiences with or at the Ethical Business Summit, which took place last September in London. And then sort of, roughly an hour in, we'll shift and take a look at that collaborative document, see what input there's been from all of you, from all of us, basically, and open up to a Q&A session. And at the end of that, like 40 minutes later, like 20 to 6, perhaps we'll try to wrap up and try to define a couple of next steps. How can we work together to find solutions, remedies, and then we'll have a couple of closing statements, perhaps, and that, so far. I see a raised hand. Is that a question at the moment? No, there's no raised hand. There is a raised hand.
Yes. I cannot switch off.
I can't see who's raising their hand. Okay. Okay. Okay, so in terms of housekeeping, we have a chat that will be monitored by Enrica, and she'll be collecting questions and grouping them together. So whenever the need arises, we'll be able to include questions and feedback. And essentially, the main housekeeping item is an encouragement to be constructive. We're aware that there are a lot of challenges, grievances at the moment, or well, not only at the moment, but our approach would be not to mute those grievances, but to take a constructive approach by pointing everyone, pointing yourselves towards potential solutions on how we can improve the situation. That would be the main input that we'd like to share at this stage. That would be great, because I think that would be the way to take us forward. Yep. So the collaborative document that I was mentioning, let me just share my screen so I can introduce you to that. And once I've taken you through the basics, I'll share the link in the chat. So, oops. Can everyone see my screen? That should Sorry, that should have been. Mm-hmm. That's not working the way it was supposed to be. That's typical. Always. So, where is this? Okay, sorry. I need to log in because this is a platform that is very data sensitive. Good thing you couldn't see my password. That would have been not very data sensitive. I'm sorry about the delay. I should have logged in again. It's no use pressing the refresh button. I just realized. So here we go. So CryptPad, yes, that's an open source alternative to Google Documents. You can do all kinds of things, Excel spreadsheets and Word documents, collaborative, and also these kind of diagrams that will hopefully load in a second. So here we go. Finally. Can everyone see that? Yeah. Okay. So essentially, it's a bit like a Miro board. What you can do is by either pressing the add button, you can add text, you can add rectangles, ellipses, and all kinds of shapes and forms. Or you can double click and you can enter your text. Any thoughts, suggestions, grievances, contributions, whatever. And you can drag and drop them wherever you like. You can use connectors. Make sure to drag those right to the center of the box or the shapes that you've just added. And then you can add and you can rearrange as you please. And yeah, basically there's all kinds of shapes you can add just text, you can add, yeah, as I mentioned. And yep. And the idea would be to have everyone, if you want to contribute to the discussion and share your input, share your views, share your experiences, and especially share suggestions, ideas, and approaches on how to improve things in relation to fairness and collaboration. So, okay, just let me share the link. Edit. Copy link. So, where's our chat? I'll just stop sharing for a moment. And so I can get back to the screen type message. So, is everyone seeing that link? Yes? No?
I
Is that
think
visible?
you only shared it with the hosts and panelists, but not with
okay,
everyone.
sorry.
There's a function you select
yeah,
everyone.
sorry. My bad. There we go. Meet everyone. Yep. Thanks, John. Okay, yep. Seeing those thumbs, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to introducing our panelists. Where do we start? Anya, would you like to start, perhaps?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. My name is Anya. I run a translation company called AJT. So called because I started out as a freelance translator. So it was Anya Jones Translation, but now we're a fully blown team. So it's just Team AJT. But we're a UK-based company that specializes in translation and localization for the European markets. And we're also a B corporation.
Thanks. And thank you for joining us today, Anya. Heike, would you like to continue?
Yes, Heike Leinhauser. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here and thanks for having me. I'm a translator, also a co-owner of a translation company in the south of Germany, so located near Munich. Actually, this is my main profession, running a translation company. And then as a voluntary worker, I'm the president of the EUATC. For those who don't know what is EUATC and that very special acronym, sorry for that, we are an umbrella organization, and our members are the National Associations of Translation Companies. So we are an umbrella, like, for example, Fit Europe is an umbrella for the freelance associations in the European countries. So, and yeah, so our members are associations, but we have via that network a huge network of members, also working and employing a lot of translators, project managers, account managers, but also work with freelancers. So, and yeah, I'm jealous that you had the idea of organizing such a cool event, but more than happy to participate. Thanks for that.
Thank you. John.
I'm John O'Shea. I'm the chairperson of Fit Europe. Sorry, I'm also responding to the questions in the Q&A as well.
Okay.
In a little bit. So I, on a personal level, I'm a legal translator, and I've been the chairperson of Fit Europe for the last 3 years. And before that, I was on the board of Fit Europe, and it's been increasingly obvious that associations need to be having discussions like the one that we're having today, that the situation in the market is changing rapidly, and we need to try and solve some sort of these issues that are emerging. So I'm very happy that we're able to bring everyone together and at least initiate conversations about these topics today.
Thank you. Diego, would you like to say a couple of words?
Sure, thank you. Happy to be here today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Diego. I'm the founder of Creative Words. It's an LSP based in Italy. I'm a translator by education. Actually, I'm an interpreter by education. Never had the chance to do that. Too difficult. Good job, guys, on interpreting. It's really the most difficult job I can think of. And I'm also a member of the LIND, which is the Language Industry Expert Group at the Commission, and past president of ALIA. ALIA is an association of companies, of translation companies. So it's a little bit different than EUATC. And we have members that are only LSP, meaning LSC, better maybe. So companies. Yeah, happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Patrick.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name is Patrick Feuerstein. Thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be part of this panel here, and happy to meet you all in the audience as well. I'm a researcher, and I'm based at the Berlin Social Science Center, where the Secretariat of the Fair Work Project is located, a global action research project hosted by the Oxford Internet Institute and the Berlin Social Science Center. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more in detail about our project in a few minutes, I guess. So looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So there's 6 of us on the panel, well, excluding me in a sense, because I'm going to be more in a moderating role than in a panelist role. But initially we were hoping we would be 7. The association missing is Elia. Diego, you're not representing Elia, although you're a member, which is disappointing that they're not participating. I was in Riga in February for the Elia Together conference, and well, yes, essentially, it seems they're a little reluctant to join at least a public conversation. They have signaled that they would be willing to join a closed conversation, but yeah, especially given the fact that the conference in February was based around the theme of perfect harmony, and there were two tracks. One was Let's Meet in the Middle, and the other one was We're on the Same Side. And this would have been a great opportunity, well, yeah, to signal that we are on the same side, or that we can meet in the middle. But that's the way it is. We tried our best to have them here today, but I'm sure we'll find ways later on to engage with them. So, initial thoughts on fairness. That's a very, well, sort of tricky topic, as I find myself. I've tried to come up with some initial thoughts on what fairness is. And the best that I found was taking an approach where well, fairness is what sets in when we're talking about collaboration, when it's not governed by rules and regulations, but that's sort of fairness is the space that we open up when we start making individual decisions about how we want to collaborate, instead of delegating responsibility to abstract concepts like the market, because the market is what dictates rates, the market is what clients want, the market is what, well, there's demand, and the moment we sort of make that decision that to acknowledge the complexity of these relationships, that's the moment where we can start to build relationships that are perhaps fairer and that go beyond delegating this responsibility. That was my take. So, Diego, what's your take on fairness?
Oh, yeah. I've been thinking, I've been recently posting a few things about the market situation in terms of, being cooperating and getting together. So I've been thinking a lot about fairness. I guess most of the times when we think about fairness and working conditions, it's about the rates. I try to incorporate fairness in other things as well. I'm not saying I don't count the fairness on the rates. So I can talk about what we do and how we try to be fair. I'm thinking, giving feedback. I'm thinking, and this is also related to fair work and what we achieved with them, like having transparent working agreements, having easy ongoing processes that are as less time consuming as possible, for instance. In these times of really big changes, it's about providing upskilling opportunities. Of course, it's about fair payment terms, and we're working hard to achieve that as much as we can. It has to do with our vendor selection practices. We don't have like a huge database of people that we contact every now and then, twice a year or only in the summer. We try to keep our translators busy, not dependent on us. I want to clarify that, because they should not depend on us. They're still freelancers, most of them. But we do want to provide like a safe continuity, let's say, of work. Probably the fairest, it's a word in English, initiative that we did is our free e-learning platform for translators, which cost us a lot of money and time. And I think this is how I'm trying to show that we want to cooperate, because I'm basically teaching on different topics for free to people that might be working for my competitors or even my customers. And it's about trying to hear the opinion of our freelancers with surveys, with regular surveys, and of course act on those, act on the replies. Since I'm coming from a comment that I saw recently, a post that I saw recently, it's about not having, this sort of first come, first serve approach that some companies have with freelancers. We try to build team and putting them together, have them talk together, and give them work, basically. So it's many different things beyond rates and beyond payment. It's many things. That's how we try to live fairness as best as we can.
Yeah, perhaps we can talk about more about that later. When you mentioned like first come first serve systems, for instance. Anya, sorry. What's your take on fairness?
Totally agree with all of the examples that Diego just gave. I do think fairness is made up of many different parts, I guess, but in a very broad sense, I think fair work centers essentially around creating an economic system in which everyone can thrive, where we're not treading on each other to, get richer or, gain market share. And I mentioned earlier that we're a B Corp certified translation company. In very simple terms, that means we've made a legal commitment to not just be purely profit driven as a company, but to look after people and planet at the same time. So keep that balance. And we kind of feel that obsession, that old way of doing business, that obsession with kind of maximizing shareholder profits at all costs is as the main driving factor for exploitative practices in our industry, as well as other industries. We're not alone in this. And I think that the old way of doing business is just not a sustainable economic model. And yet it's the economic model that influences how our supply chains are set up, how our platforms are built, how pricing is structured, what kind of contracts we set up. And, to my mind, if we want to achieve fair working conditions, we need to zoom out a little bit of our individual grievances that we might have, or the individual problems that we see in our industry. Just zoom out before we zoom back in and really look at those overarching economic structures. The B Corp framework is just one way of doing that, but it's been really fantastic in giving us a guiding framework of how to do business better without treading on each other. And in the end, I think it all links back to the broader topic of sustainability. So if we don't look after each other, if we don't look after the translators, the very people who underpin this whole industry, the ones that are doing the work at the end of a very long supply chain, then eventually we're all going to fall apart. And that's bad for everyone. It's bad for translators. It's bad for translation companies, technology providers, as well as our clients.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I've been through an ECG audit, the economy for the common good, which is and I'm coming from the freelancer perspective. But yeah, essentially it's the same approach. And yeah, I can very, very much relate to that idea of zooming out to look at how we can individually, and then also at a larger structural level, think about how we want to shape the way we run our economies and then shape our individual businesses. There is some leverage there sometimes that we tend to oversee sometimes. So, yep, Heike, please, what are your initial thoughts on fairness?
Difficult because it's just a broad topic, almost philosophical, I think.
Yes,
and
definitely.
As we all are intellectual workers, I think we will be able to tackle that. So I don't want to be philosophical, so I'm a very pragmatic person. So if we start with a very general approach, I think it starts with, for example, events like today. Fairness starts with talking to and with each other and not about each other. You only can be fair if you know about the needs of your partner. And I think we really have to build really a platform of trust, which only works if we learn very much about each other. And I don't want to be too general, because we have to be hands-on. It's about the current working situation in the market, and you said rightly, Liam, it's not just accepting market conditions or accepting that conditions are dictated, but how can you change the situation? I think by communicating. We have to talk to each other, also to the end client, which is not easy, but in the end, it starts, a service starts with a client who has work to be done. And yes, I really, just to be more concrete, I think we should share the way we work, what we need. We did that in the past already, so it's not that we don't know what the different stakeholders in the market need, but let's get more personal, maybe.
No, that's an excellent point. And one of the takeaways for me from Riga was that we have two opposing trends in a sense. If you can automate as much as possible, but that takes away the autonomy to communicate. And fairness essentially hinges on how much space is there to communicate your needs. I'm very much a fan of an approach that initially comes from the sphere of social work, which is called servant leadership. And the key question in that context is, what can I do to help you get your job done? How can I support you in getting that assignment done? What do you need? What can I provide? Instead of just dictating. So it's a very communicative approach. I very much agree with that. Patrick, I know when I asked you about your initial approach to fairness, you gave a very pragmatic answer, because fair work is already defined how your research project defines fairness. So we're all very keen to hear from you about fair work, about your approach, about the criteria, the principles, the methodology, and a couple of results from the recent ratings that you published.
Yeah, thank you. So I will start share my screen if that's okay with you, so that you can all see my slides here. I hope that works. Yeah. Perfect. Yes. Amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, so thanks again for introducing our research here. As I said, I'm from Fair Work, a global action research project on fair work in the platform economy. And what I'm going to present today is the research that we have done on translation and transcription platforms. And we've published that research in the Fair Work Report 2022, the follow-up ratings for 2023. And you can find more information about these reports on fair.work/TNT. For us as Fair Work, as I said, we evaluate and assess working conditions on digital labor platforms. Digital labor platforms, we make an important distinction here between what we call location-based platforms, which are all these platforms that require the service provider and the people using that service to be in the same place. That means, for example, ride-hailing, food delivery, and all the other platforms that we all are very familiar with, I guess. But digital labor platforms are also platforms that provide services that can be more or less done from anywhere. And we call these platforms cloud work platforms. And translation and transcription platforms are an important sector within this field. If we believe the Statista data, we see a doubling of the market between 2009 and 2019. And that stresses the importance that linguistic services and translation and transcription have gained in the past. And if we look at that debate about the sector, we see that these platforms are often hailed as new income opportunities for workers, mostly from the global south, to enter labor markets that they were previously excluded from, and by that to generate additional and new income opportunities. But we also know from the literature and also from the debate in the press and all that these income opportunities come with often very precarious working conditions. And I know that most of the audience, I think you know much better than I do what the risks and harms are on the translation platforms. But let me just briefly highlight some of the most important challenges and issues that we see here. First of all, on translation and transcription platforms, workers often face very low pay, very low rates, and unpaid labor. So workers spend a lot of time searching for jobs that is working time that is not paid at all. And as independent contractors, as workers are often classified on these platforms, there's no obligation to pay a minimum wage, which results in many, many workers not earning the minimum wage on these platforms. We also see long hours, so people work very long hours to make a living due to the low rates. And we see an increase in competition. So in both years, 2023 and 2022, the majority of workers that we interviewed said that competition is increasing. I said that the market is increasing, but so is the number of people looking for jobs on these platforms. So there's stiff competition between workers on these platforms that tend to fuel the race to the bottom, which is very worrying here. We also see very unsafe working conditions, and both in physical terms, like sitting, working with a computer for a very long time. I guess we all know that is not particularly useful for your health. But there are also like mental harms, like transcribing 911 calls, translating violent content without being labeled as such, can be very, very harmful for workers who do that for a full day, right? And of course, there's harassment and violence, particularly for women and minority groups on these platforms. We also see discrimination and unfair management processes. I said women, ethnic minorities face particular risk of bad ratings. So if they get bad ratings due for discrimination reasons, for stereotype reasons, that's an issue where they get bad ratings. And when their ratings drop, they are being excluded from job opportunities on some platforms. That is a major issue here. We also see that accounts can be deactivated or disciplined. Workers get disciplined without reasons, without explanation, and in many cases without a proper appeals process that they can use to argue with the platform about the rating, for example, or the deactivation. And last but not least, workers are usually in a very structurally weak bargaining position due to individualization. So there's almost no collective representation for translators, for workers on digital labor platforms and cloud work platforms. So usually platforms are in a very powerful position here vis-a-vis the workers. Now, what does the Fair Work Project do about this? As I said, we are a global research network. And that means that we have done ratings of digital labor platforms in 38 countries last year, plus 25 cloud work platforms. For that purpose, we cooperate with a wide range of different organizations, universities, research institutions, NGOs, think tanks. And the network is hosted by the Oxford Internet Institute and the Berlin Social Science Center. But we couldn't do that without any of the other organizations. So it's really a collaborative effort here. The money is coming from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and the GIZ, the German Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, that is hosting us and that is supporting us in for this project. As I said, we are assessing working conditions and fair work on platforms. And to do that, we have come up with a set of fair work principles, as we call it, that cover 5 different aspects of the working relationship. You see that each principle, fair pay, fair conditions, fair contracts, fair management, and fair representation, has 2 thresholds. The first threshold for fair pay, for example, is that the platform should ensure that workers are paid in full and in a timely manner for all completed work in a recognized national currency. This is the first threshold for principle 1. The second principle, the second threshold is that the platform should ensure that the vast majority of workers earns at least the local minimum wage, depending on the country where they reside and where they live. So for fair conditions, we have again 2 thresholds. The first is that in order to limit competition and to limit the race to the bottom, platforms implement measures against overwork, underwork, and unpaid search time, which is more or less to control the demand and supply of labor on the platform, to limit competition to some extent. The second threshold here is that the platform should implement policies to protect workers from work-related health and safety risks, which in most cases is like a system to label the content of the tasks that are distributed. So if you tag a task saying, hey, this is violent content, only do this if you're prepared for that. This is content of 911 calls. This is, for example, medical transcriptions or whatever. You can limit the mental health risks for workers a lot. Third principle is about fair contracts. First threshold is about accessible and comprehensible terms and conditions. Are there terms and conditions at all? And are those available for workers? And is there a right for workers for legal recourse? The second threshold is that the contracts are consistent with the workers' terms of engagement on the platform. Sounds simple, but it's crucial. Most platforms, although they treat workers as independent contractors, limit the extent to which workers can also work for other platforms or for clients outside of the platform. So these so-called non-compete clauses are an important part of many platforms' terms and conditions, and that is also very often an important constraint for workers when they work for these platforms, because they are limited or they cannot work on other platforms or for customers outside of the platform, which limits their income opportunities. Fair management is more or less about communication processes and anti-discrimination. So the first threshold would be on documented processes through which workers can appeal platform decisions, bad ratings, deactivations, and so on. Is there a human representative I can talk to? Can I complain about some decisions? Can I discuss stuff? That is also relevant for the first threshold. The second threshold is then about anti-discrimination policy, either by the platform or by clients. Is there a mechanism to protect workers from discrimination or not? And how does it work? And last but not least, fair representation is all about collective voice, an independent dispute resolution mechanism, or the recognition of an independent collective body of workers, like a union, a worker association, that a platform could engage in collective bargaining with. So, as I said, these two thresholds are important because you get a point for each threshold. So when we score a platform, we usually award a point for each threshold. That means that per principle, a platform can get up to 2 points, which can lead to 10 out of 10 points in the best case here. Important to say, when we say 10 out of 10, it's not the dream platform or the best place to work at, but it's basically saying this platform meets basic minimum standards, minimum basic labor standards. So 10 out of 10 is a good start, but it does not mean that it has to stop there. Okay, how do we collect data? How do we evaluate digital labor platforms? To do that, we draw on 3 sources of information. First is we try to get hold of everything that is publicly available on that platform. So we try to register at the platform, we try to analyze the contracts, terms and conditions, we look at the press, so whatever is available. The second source is we interview the workers working for these platforms. In this case, for cloud work platforms, since workers are spread all over the globe, we do that by an online survey. And third, we also invite managers to participate in the scoring process. So we invite the platform management to for meetings to discuss our results and also to provide evidence that we take into consideration when coming up with the scores. In the end, we put all these 3 sources together, all the information we got, and we have a collective peer review process. In the end, we are still academics, so we like peer review processes. So we try to come up with a proper score for each platform, and we share these scores with the platforms as a preliminary score, and then give the platforms 4 to 6 weeks time to react to these scores, maybe make some changes before we finalize the scores and publish them in a league table. Here you can see the result of our 2023 ratings of translation and transcription platforms. And you can see that there's quite a mix of scores. So you see at the top, creative words. Diego, I'm happy that you're here today. Our first 10 out of 10 platform ever since I worked for Fairwork or since Fairwork started. So this is really exceptional. Then you have translated, also very good score with 8 out of 10. Then transcribing with 4, Django 1 out of 10, Unstable 1 out of 10. And then you have 5 of the platforms where we did not find any evidence for any threshold. Important to say, this does not mean that they do not meet the thresholds. This means we were not able to get the evidence. So neither the interviews, nor the desk research, nor the evidence that we get from the platform was enough to convince us that they meet the threshold. That's an important point to note here. It's also important to note that the 10 out of 10 for creative words was not what we came up with in the beginning, but it was rather the outcome of a very productive cooperation with creative words in the process. As I said, The rating cycle is not in one on-off point of contact with the platforms, but rather an iterative process of communication, collaboration, where we interact with the platforms. We ask for evidence, we ask for changes, we ask for more information if we are in doubt. And Creative Words was exceptionally cooperative in this sense. And I'm happy that Diego will also have the opportunity to report on his view on that process, what he found very interesting or challenging or maybe also tiring, whatever. We'll hear from you in a minute. But for us, it was important to see that this is basically the punchline that we always wanted to make that league table here, that bad working conditions and precarious working conditions are not an inevitable outcome of technological development of the platform model as such, but it's basically management decisions. And these decisions can also be unmade. And the case of Creative Words was a very good example of how management can react to challenges and can make improvements and can foster fair work on a digital label platform. So this is what we want to show with the league table here, that there's choice, and we also want to encourage users of translation and transcription platforms to make socially informed choices by highlighting better and worse practices in the platform economy to spur some competition between the platforms to also strive for better working conditions. Once again, Fair Work is a network. It's me presenting our results here, but it's the work of so many people that are involved. So thanks to all of them, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Patrick, very much. Before we move on to Diego, I have a question here from, where is it? From Zilka. For you. She says, regarding mandating minimum wage at local rates, how do you stop this from becoming another race to the bottom where translators from countries with lower minimum wages are prioritized? That's one of the points that we've also talked about previously. Do you have a response for this?
Yeah, shall I answer right away?
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, of course. That is a good question. That is definitely a challenge, and that is a challenge ever since globalization basically started. And we also see that competition, of course, on digital labor platforms. And implementing minimum wages that would cover the global north would basically exclude a lot of people and would limit the competition for people from the global south. So this is also considered as some kind of protectionism, and we did not want to go into that. So for us, for Principle 1.1, it's important that people, wherever they live, wherever they come from, they at least earn their local minimum wage. And we know that this is not perfect, and this, of course, creates some competition. But this is the only way that we could think of like how we can deal with that in a fair way.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions? Okay. If not, you can follow up on the chat, please. Okay, Diego, let's hear from you. Your experience of working with Fair Work. What were the ups, the downs? What was the most, perhaps the easiest changes to implement? What were the most difficult changes to implement?
Okay, I need to start by saying that I didn't work hands-on on communicating with Fair Work. Jada, she might be here listening. Our former community manager was in touch with Fair Work. I think you met at an event, a localization event. Of course, I had to come up in conversation with Jada and my operations manager as well many times to comply with the request that Fair Work made. But I was not working hands-on. So thank you, Jada. It was a journey. And in fact, I have some notes, and forgive me if I need to read them, of how it worked. We needed to do quite some change. I have to say that we were, some things were ready already, but then we needed, in order to comply, and we needed to change quite some things. As Patrick was saying, it was a journey, it was a constant conversation. I also want to say that I know that getting 10 out of 10 is not the final goal. It's a starting point. And I believe also, thinking of certifications, the certification is not about getting the certificate by itself. It's about putting your processes, putting your practices into discussion. It's about being willing to change and improve, as Patrick mentioned. So how did it work? Well, Patrick outlined the process in a very good way. Jada, she had the first introductory interview, and then there was a survey, and I want to say the survey, we don't know who was surveyed, we don't know who you guys from Fair Work talked to. And I think this is for transparency and neutrality, which is of course good. There was a second interview and many email exchanges about many things. The documentation was provided, as I said, was pretty comprehensive already. We have a service level agreement, very well documented. We have a non-disclosure agreement. We have a code of conduct. We have an onboarding kit. We have many things which we have to provide to Fair Work. Again, some things we're already doing gladly. On some other things we needed to introduce some change. Probably the most difficult change that we needed to introduce, well, not the most difficult, more this is something I hadn't thought of in terms of not being fair, or not being fair enough, is changing our non-compete clause. Normally, when I think about a non-compete clause, it's about like not having your freelancers get in touch with your clients, or so working on with the same clients. It's about not having this sort of transparency. So this is how it was formulated at the beginning. Basically, you cannot get in touch with their customers. This is more or less what it said. But now we have reduced this non-compete clause to the duration of the initial projects, which I think it's a big change. So probably this is the one, not difficult, but the one I had to think longest about, I think.
Does that mean that your translators can now communicate with clients, or what is the specific change?
Well, there are times where we have our translators communicating with clients. In any case, sometimes we select them together with clients, so we have this transparency already. It's about not holding them from competition. It's about not forbidding them to compete with us. Sometimes, yeah, the most standard clause is probably restrictive in this respect. But yeah, they're already communicating together most of the time in any case. So it's not just about communicating, it's about not forbidding them to compete after they've done their project and it's done, basically. But correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how it should be now. Okay, so yeah, because many times the freelancers get in touch with the customers already. Many times they know what kind of content they are translated. So I get our fear out of transparency and out of lack of trust. The standard competition non-compete clause would prevent freelancers from being able to get in touch with those customers. Does it answer your question, Liam?
Yeah. There's loads of more questions, but no.
Yeah, sure.
I know. But what I really appreciate is that you say this is a starting point. I mean, Patrick pointed out this is not an ideal sort of. It's not you're a perfectly fair company, and that everyone who reaches the 10 out of 10 threshold is basically meeting minimum requirements. And
absolutely, it's a journey. I never heard about Fair Work before Jada did. So it made me think of, some clauses, for instance, that was not even considering. So it's really the journey. It's not the mark or whatever, and it's a starting point. As I said, I believe we do fair things in many other ways that Fair Work doesn't consider, for instance. So I mean, it doesn't solve the whole issue of being fair. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm reading the Q&A chat at the moment. I'm reading from Gabriella, for instance, the local minimum wage should apply to unskilled work, not to highly skilled professionals. That's essentially the point that I was trying to make. initially about fairness, where there isn't any regulation that stipulates that skilled workers need to earn X times minimum wage. There is simply no regulation that dictates that, where it's up to us as the market or players in the market to come up with ideas on how to move in that direction, I think. But I wanted to hear just briefly from Patrick, because Diego said it's a starting point. I was wondering what your experience is in engaging with platforms, with large agencies, in terms of their willingness to engage. How many agencies have you approached that didn't respond whatsoever, that weren't interested? Yeah, is there sort of takeaways that you could share?
Yeah, it's difficult. So I think the most important thing that we see in our ratings is that most of the interaction happens after a couple of years. So in the first year, no matter what country we rate platforms in or for the cloud work sector, usually platforms are very skeptical. They don't know where we're coming from. They tend to ignore us. Why should they invest time in us? They don't know who we are, if we're going to be there next year. So usually the engagement is pretty low in the first year. But after the first report was launched, the first rating table is publicly available and platforms see that we are still there and we're coming back, then usually that motivation increases. And this is where we see the best interactions with platforms, where they say, okay, you've been the last year, we had 0 out of 10. How can we get like 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10? What do we have to do? And then we are more than happy to help. So we have quite a good overview of best practices on the sector, and we are very happy to share that with the platforms and to consult them on changes. And it's, as I said, it's exceptional with Creative Words. I think this was the first year that we rated your platform that you were eager to cooperate right from the beginning. It was the same with Translated last year, but most of the, especially the bigger platforms, Reps, Market, they continuously refuse to interact with us. So this is also possible. So we see, I can't give an exact number now how many % of the platforms are willing to engage with us, but there are some who start to cooperate right from the beginning. Then there are some platforms who start after a couple of years, and then there are those that are continuously ignoring us. But yeah, that's what we have to deal with. But
yeah, there's one thing that I will not forgive myself for not saying. I know that one of the biggest concerns for freelancers is that agencies don't let them communicate between each other. We do facilitate that, and we added, because of Fair Work, thank you very much, a clause in our code of conduct where we say we don't not oppose, but we encourage like freelancers getting together in forms of even collective representation. Because I know this is a concern, as John said at the beginning. And I will not forgive myself for not saying this.
I'd like to move on to Heike and Anya and hear from the Ethical Business Summit, because I was actually very keen to join, but to be honest, it was just too expensive. So Heike, would you like to say a couple of words? Key takeaways from the Ethical Business Summit. Sort of, did you come away with a definition of ethics? Anya was there and she gave a workshop on how her agency works. Is EU-ATC implementing, or are other member associations on the agency side implementing any moves towards more ethical, towards more fair practices?
Yes, good questions. First of all, the Ethical Business Summit took place in September last year, and it was a co-organization of the ATC and EU-ATC. So in fact, it was the usual yearly ATC conference happening in London in September, with that special theme on ethical business. EU-ATC was kind of a co-organizer, because we are the umbrella organization, and we also wanted to bring more European translation companies into that conference. And I think it was very inspiring, but the mission of the conference wasn't to really work out clear regulations about what is ethical and what isn't. So it was more kind of an exchange and really talking about what is implemented by translation companies in terms of ethical business. And the range was really from working conditions up to AI and the incorporation of AI into the workflows. So it was it was a bit like, for me personally, it was very inspiring because I was, for example, I attended Anja's workshop and I could see how popular B Corp is already in UK, but not yet in the rest of Europe. The approach is really becoming popular now. But for example, in Germany, we are very much working with the EcoVadis label, which is much more rating about sustainability, but it's not that economy which respects all the stakeholders approach. So you have a lot of different approaches and labels around. So the summit was really, really interesting, but we missed a lot of stakeholders of the industry. So it was more or less a meeting amongst small and middle-sized companies in the UK and throughout Europe. And it was also more or less, but correct me if I'm wrong, Anja, really preaching to the converted. So it was, I think we had a very high common understanding what ethical business means in the translation industry and generally, and we inspired each other, but we didn't have these key takeaways in order to bring into the industry. So in order to do that, I think we would need a much bigger event. And we really had to invite all the stakeholders of the market. This is what I said at the beginning. It's not enough that translation companies talk to each other about being ethical. We have to talk to our partners and define that. So in fact, it was a brilliant start. I think it was very, very brave of ATC to bring on that topic, because at that stage in the industry, all the people just were worried about ChatGPT and AI, and I think when you organize just such an event and you really have to somehow earn at least a small profit with it, then it was not the most popular topic you can have as an event, but we just did it, and I think it was really important. But we have to go on with that topic. So I personally learned a lot. I got a lot of inspiration for my company, but maybe just this one sentence, as I said, preaching to the converted. Working ethically and in a good common sense and in a good partnership is nothing new in the translation industry. So I think we also can focus on all these brilliant partnerships between freelancers and translation companies running all these companies and freelancers. And I think it's also very difficult to discuss about wages, minimum wages and everything. And also I saw the question, what do you mean by platform? Is it, because for example, I don't consider my company being a platform. We are not just dealing with translations. We provide a service. And in order to provide services, you need a lot of partners and stakeholders, and you simply can't even try to abuse these workers. They simply wouldn't work anymore for this company. So we really have to very much look into the industry and look into sectors, and because it's such a fragmented and huge industry, we somehow have to differentiate. So, but back to your question, and I don't want to talk too long. I was mega grateful about that event. I would love to have a second version of it, maybe co-organized with freelance associations or Fit Europe, and this would be great. And thanks also for mentioning that you thought, Liam, it was just too expensive. It was already sponsored, but we can go much lower with the fees if we know that a lot of people will attend. So it's not so much about making profit. It's about not making a loss with these events, because we simply can't afford it. We don't have the budgets. But if we look into a lot of attendees, no problem to organize such an event for much, much lower fees. Happy to do so.
I just thought
I love that.
I thought it was a pity because one of the main partners in that relationship was missing. At least that was my impression from the outside. I gathered on LinkedIn that there were a couple of freelance translators who did attend, but to make this sort of a partnership event in a sense, that would have been something that I really would have enjoyed.
Yes,
and would have loved to see.
You're totally right, and I think we have to change the focus here. So it was really, as I said, it was the very well-known and traditional ATC conference in September in London, with, I think, a mega important topic, and we can develop that further. So we all learn.
Yeah, Anya, do you share that view? Do you think it was a preaching to the converted? You gave a workshop. What was your impression?
I think on the whole, Heike is right, and you and I, Liam, we were talking before the conference, and you were like, "Is there any chance of getting a discount for freelancers?" And I was like, "Come on, Raisa, is there something we can do?" And it just wasn't possible. But I do think it's a brilliant idea that we should take forward, because essentially, I think what we're all trying to get to is we need to communicate more with each other, translators with freelancers. Freelance translators with the agencies. We need to understand each other's pain points and know how we can support each other, and what better way to do that than to actually be together in one room. And I think this is a great starting point, but I think there is something really powerful about meeting in person and having conversations over a lunch, or I think, yeah, definitely up for that. I guess for me, I started the B Corp journey because I was really disillusioned myself with the translation industry. And as a mid-sized translation company, maybe on the smaller side, we do also support large MLVs. So we know firsthand of some of the practices that are going on and how unfair some of these things are. So that was my driving factor for trying to build an ethical agency and become B Corp, and why I was so thrilled that the ATC was kind of putting on this event. I guess not many of the big players of the industry were there. So I think that was unfortunate. But what I think I took away from that is that middle section of small to mid-sized LSPs, language service companies, is huge. We make up a huge part, the same as translators. We make a huge part of our industry. So we do have a collective power. And there's also a lot of great players in that layer where before we go into the whole platform and automation and driving down the prices to the last little cent and squeeze the last bit of margin out of that. So there is a lot of actually great companies there, and that's what gave me hope. And I did that workshop on the second day together with James from Comtech, another B Corp translation company, and we sat down, I think it was probably about 20 translation company representatives. So it's 20 translation companies in a room talking about things about how we champion translators, how we look at payment terms. And what gave me hope was the fact that I was surrounded by 20 other translation companies that were doing really cool stuff. Like stuff I was like, yep, okay, I'm going to take that home. Yep, okay, we're going to do that. And it led me to, I was really inspired by that. And it gave me a lot of hope that actually we do have lots of great companies, translation companies, who probably often come from a translator background themselves, have walked a mile in the shoe of a freelance translator and really understand the mechanics around that and want to build a good business. And I think sometimes the conversations around our industry are really skewed because there's some large player who hold a lot of weight in our industry. When you look at I don't know if anyone saw the language industry report by the ATC and NIMSI, it was published, and you have the top 20, and at the very top you've got so many gazillion pounds revenue a year, and like all that is sitting right at the top there. But actually that's just one part of the industry. There's lots of in the middle ground that's actually really good, and that's, I think, where we collectively can make a real difference. So even though we were preaching to the converted, I do think it's a good place to start to have that common ground and then develop that further.
One of this may be my personal experience only, but my impression is that I've not been working with agencies because I find it so terribly difficult to find agencies that will work with terms and conditions that suit me or that I can agree with. So one of the challenges is basically perhaps, giving visibility to those agencies in a way that makes them more, giving them more visibility to those good players. What we have at the moment is we have rankings based on revenue. That's what NIMSI Top 100 is about. That's what other rankings are about. So yeah, one approach could be, for instance, as a suggestion to create visibility. In which ways? That's up to us to define. But to give visibility to agencies that are fairer, then yeah.
I think the Fair Work principle is a great way to start, by not just looking at revenue, but actually looking at the things that matter to translators, matter to language professionals. I think it's always a difficult one with, who decides what good is, who decides what's perfect, and I think what's perfect for one person is terrible for another. But I do think the Fair Work principle as a guideline gives us a good place to start with. These are 5 principles that, at the very minimum, every company should really get 10 out of 10, and then we can talk about how we can make it fantastic. So yeah, but I think, giving visibility in that way is a good start.
Yeah, but wouldn't it come at least from freelancers? There have been initiatives to talk badly about all sorts of agencies. I never saw an initiative to talk about good agencies. And again, there is this constant fight between these 2 players, which are huge. But we all, when you go to a restaurant and you're not satisfied with the food, you get out of the restaurant and you post a negative review. You never or rarely post a positive review. And I guess that's the same. We are all used to post negative feedback rather than good one. So this is why we appreciate initiatives as Fair Work, as a starting point again.
Yep, as a starting point, definitely. And one of the points that I definitely disagree with is using minimum wage as a benchmark. But that's one of the principles that Fair Work is well, that's just set, and that it applies to all its ratings, no matter what industry, no matter what sector they're looking at.
But the creation of such a visibility platform, I believe, should come from freelancers. It cannot come from our agencies. It has to be independent. It cannot be driven by us.
Well, it wouldn't be independent if it comes from freelancers, just as a sort of basic. It would be freelancer driven.
Independent from the agencies.
Yeah, I know, but it would be one approach perhaps to do something like that collectively, to have associations. If we're talking about meeting in the middle, it would be an initiative to have the agency side and the freelancer side get together and talk about which criteria can we use to give visibility to good agencies and have like a good agency index, for instance. Heike, you want to say something, please?
Yes, thank you. I also think that having criteria is very important because it gives freelance translators a solid basis for asking questions and the right questions. The wages are always a bit different because, especially for freelance translators, and I fully agree, it shouldn't be a minimum wage or rate because, as I said, we are intellectual workers. It's the translation industry is difficult because we have a lot of part-time workers. So you can't really tell that all the professional translators are really full-time translators and they are real pros. And I think this is a big difficulty for all the pros in the market, because you can't really judge who is who, and all the well-established translation companies, they know about the reputations of the freelance translators and vice versa. So the players know each other, especially when you work in specialization fields, and it's I think the market is so difficult for all those who enter into the market or those who are not well established yet and don't have their partners, because it's not just if you are a freelance translator, so it's not just about working on platforms or for translation companies, but you also serve end clients and you have that huge mix. And I think a first step would be to define these criteria in order to give questions at hand to ask for future clients. So, for example, in all those years in which I've been in the market, I was rarely asked questions by freelancers. I know a lot, we have a lot of freelance translators applications, but nobody seems to ask questions, which is kind of a passive behavior, which is difficult. I mean, we know Chris asks a lot of questions, but Chris, I consider you being a well-established translator. So all those to whom we want to be partners and inform them, we have to tell them which questions would I expect, because I consider myself being a client. I serve clients and I'm a client to my partners as well. So maybe we could start. I know that a couple of countries have already worked on recommendations for the cooperation between freelance translators and translation companies. So I was part of such a working group, I think 15 years ago with BDU in Germany. We have recommendations in Hungary, in a lot of countries, and maybe we should somehow review those and just go to a European level and not, as you said at the beginning, not regulate things, but really give recommendations and at hand in order to really select the right partners. I also could see in the chat that question or comment about liability. This is a very, very easy one. If you work, for example, for a translation company which is certified according to ISO 17100 or ISO 9001, you can't just transfer liability to a freelance translator. The company is always liable because the company works in a defined process with a very last step approving a translation or the service, and this means the company is always fully liable. Being a freelance translator, I never would sign a contract which tries to transfer liability to the translator. This is simply not correct. And I think we really have to work on these very specific items and tell freelance translators, listen, you don't have to sign such a contract. Yeah? And I'd say with all the companies around, every translation company has terms and conditions. They have framework agreements with their translators, and they have to be correct, and we even have to prove this in tenders. My company is not so much in public tendering, but we go into tenders for big private international corporations, and there it's not just about a B Corp or EcoVadis label. They ask for all these labels, but they also want to see code of conducts. They want to see the partner agreements. They want to see literally everything. So you have to be totally transparent. And I mean, we could share all of that. It's not a secret. It's yeah, in some parts, it's just common sense and ethical. So yeah, but I don't want to talk so long. I just want to use the situation in order to give a strong signal that it's not just about dealing with translations. This would be too short-sighted, definitely.
Well, it's interesting that you're mentioning contracts, because in our working group we were recently talking about contracts as well, and that there should be some kind of, or whether it would be worth setting up some kind of platform, forum, hotline, where terms and conditions can be evaluated. So if you're a freelancer and you're unsure whether you should be signing this agreement, is there any institution, any point of contact that you can turn to verify and to collect feedback, and request your partner to say, okay, this is the clause I want to have revised, and this is a clause I don't want in there at all. Yeah, we were talking about that, and then of course the question of financing such a initiative came up. And I'm mentioning that as another suggestion where we could potentially collaborate. If agencies are out there that are from the outset intent on having fair relationships with their freelancers as partners, that could be potentially something worth considering. Anya, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, I was just reading in the comments, and so I just want to say everyone for their thank you for your intelligent, brilliant comments. I think it's just really lovely to read through all of these. I thought I might just jump in with Konstantin's comment on pricing, because I think he makes a really excellent point. I guess we all know that you kind of have that double whammy of economic recession plus generative AI hitting the market, putting a lot of pressure on all of us in terms of pricing. Prices are going up, yet translation prices are somehow constantly meant to go down. And we all talk about this as an unsustainable kind of, economic situation. And we're not alone in this. I think this is a global market situation. But I do think Konstantin is right that there is a responsibility that lies with us, as well as with the really large tech companies, to put a stop to that race to the bottom of pricing. I think it just has to be said that I think that we're all racing towards the cliff, trying to outbid each other and be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and in the hope to win the race. But I think we will run out of runway and we will all fall down the cliff if we keep going that way. So I just want to say thank you for raising that pricing question, because I know it's always a hot potato. No one really wants to talk exactly about pricing, but I just want to put it out there that I think you're absolutely right. The responsibility lies with all of us to make sure we price fairly with our clients, so that we can then also price fairly with our freelancers. And just coming back to that language industry report from the ATC and NIMSI, when you look at their gross margins, they kind of gave an average, right? But like the lower end agencies were saying 25% margin. At the upper end, it was 77% margin. That is insane, right? Like, how is that ethical, that if a customer comes to an agency, 80% goes to the agency and only 20% going to the person who's actually doing the work? So I think there's quite a lot there, both in terms of pricing, but also margin structures, that I think would be really interesting to be a little bit more open about that with each other. And because I'm sure that freelancers understand that as an agency, we add value in that chain. We take care of the marketing to secure the clients. We take care of all the payment processes. We take care of speaking to the client. So, you know, you predominantly get the file to translate without having to worry about all the other mechanisms that take you away from your core work of translation. So we do add value. But I think it's not 88% or 77%, 80%. I think that's where we need to find a balance, right? I think we need to be more balanced than that. So I just wanted to shout that out.
No, I definitely agree. And I wanted to break up that dichotomy that we're still talking about. We have agencies and we have freelancers. So just to share my experience, I'm a freelancer. I don't work with agencies because, as I said, I'm finding it difficult to find agencies to work with. But I do have a larger network, and we have, I don't know, recently I said it was like a pop-up agency, so we can handle larger assignments. And what I do from the outset is I always tell my colleagues, my partners in the network, this is what the client is paying, this is what I can pass on. Is it okay if I charge 15, 20, 25% for coordination and liaising with the client? So we negotiate that from the outset. So there's, yeah, that's the kind of dialogue that we need. And I think that's where fairness comes in, because you can't really judge what is fair if you don't know what percentage is the other party earning, you know. You can offer me rates of 4 cents per word or 10 cents per word, and I can't judge whether it's fair if I don't know what are you charging the client, you know. And that's one of the main points where transparency needs to be established, where we need to start this conversation. Heike, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I mean, there are more or less fixed systems in the market when it comes to big volumes. You really have to say that, because I mean, if you look, for example, at big international corporations, they throw, let's say, yeah, in Germany, for example, a DAX corporation, they have maybe translation volumes of 200 to 300 million euros per year. And this is a lot of money. But it's never just translations. And this is why we have to enter into that discussion in a more detailed way, because you really have a huge difference when you look at, for example, pre-sales and post-sales documentation. Post-sales, like user guides, manuals, for example, they have big volumes, they are translated after the product has been sold to a client, and then you have the pre-sales document, and really very much being on the easy side now, like all the translations which work with image sales and, yeah, more or less adaptation. I wouldn't call it transcreation, because this is just for slogans and claims. I'd like to emphasize here, because this is also quite a wide discussion and not correct discussion. Transcreation is not just a creative translation. It's really a different process to the translation process. And in order to be able to fix a price between partners, you have to look at the process chain. And the process chain usually is building up a client. Just to give you an idea, in order to win a client like a big international corporation, even if you have a small volume, very small volume, it takes usually 1 year, because you don't just deal with your team, your technical team or marketing team. You have to go through the global purchase department, and you have to hand in a lot of documentation. You have, of course, price negotiations, but these are real negotiations. It's not that rates are just dictated, but you have an ecosystem, and you can't be too high and you shouldn't be too low. So it's just established. And to be very honest with you, I rarely see margins of more than 50%. It's almost impossible, because if you want to deliver a high-class service to a client, then you need high-class freelance partners and translators, and they won't sell themselves for cheap money. So on one hand, I really celebrate every freelancer who is able to serve end clients, and also the freelance networkers who are, as you say, like pop-up networks. But you have to take into account that the huge volumes are really channeled via purchase departments, and they are channeled via translation companies. So here sits the work. And as Anja rightly said, the market is still so fragmented that the so-called super agencies worldwide, they only have about 15% of the worldwide market share in the industry. So the main volumes are channeled via small and middle-sized translation companies. And I'd say at least in UK, in Germany, in France, each you have, in Italy, in Spain, you have at least 500 translation companies. They are just silent because they function. They have working ecosystems. They are invited to tenders. They have well-established freelance ecosystems, and it's very difficult to get in. So you really have to do everything. Also, as a freelance translator, you have to do serious sales and communications in order to get good and valuable volume streams. But it can work if you just present yourself, because you also have to think about how do all these volumes end up in the agencies. It's not that we just stand there and wait for the rain. This is hard work. And also this hard work has to be paid. And this is the share in all that supply chain and value chain which we need in order to get all these volumes. And honestly, I even wouldn't dare to dream of margins of 70%. Forget about it. I mean, it's really, it's mainly 30 to 50%. And for this share, we have to do all the sales work. We have to really serve the client. So it's not just, you don't just get the volume, you are in constant dialogue with clients. You have to negotiate. You have to do all the pre-processing work. You send out, you prepare everything, you send out the translation, freelance translator translates. You get it back, then you do the revision. you deliver, which is not just delivering. You really have to check everything. You really have to sign off the whole project, and you have to do an after sales. So I think the good translation companies can be so transparent about rates and just margins, because it hurts us as well. So it's not about doing a huge profit being an agency. This is mega hard work. And we all are these stakeholders of the market, and this is why this session is so important to me personally. We have to talk to each other. And yeah, just find the good ones in the industry, and they are the majority. Believe me, I know so many brilliant freelance translators, so many brilliant translation companies. We just have to make them visible.
That's the point I often hear. There are lots of agencies out there. There are lots of networks out there, and then no one is really willing to share. That's one of the points that really frustrates me enormously. But I just wanted to add, as a small point, when I say pop-up agency, I have, together with colleagues, we have won public tenders. So I know the work you're talking about, and I just want to stress it doesn't have to necessarily to do with large volumes. My approach is sort of, and I had this from Konstantin recently. You know, if you have X thousand startups in your country, but you only need, you know, your focus group is like 40. Well, you need 40 clients to run your business. You don't need 150. But that doesn't mean that the effort you're pouring into that work is less. I know those processes. I'm not ISO certified, but I'd even dare to say that we are better than ISO certified in the processes that we have placed, in the way we communicate with each other, the way we revise and edit and translate as teams. It's not a downward stream, it's a collaboration. So there are lots of people out there that potentially aren't agencies or don't market themselves as agencies, but are doing the same kind of work. And yeah, that's one point I wanted to add. I'm just going through the chat. Konstantin also said, he said, it's interesting, Heike, that you position yourself as a client to freelancers. One of the talks in Riga was from a colleague, by a colleague from Brazil, who did exactly that. He was working with agencies a lot of the time, and he felt that instead of doing another course and specializing in investing in another specialism, he branched out into the opposite direction. So he trained as a PM to understand better how agencies work. And I found that was a wonderful way of thinking out of the box. And I'm sharing that as an encouragement, perhaps to freelance translators also, for, yeah, as an opportunity or as an avenue of well, trying to invest in that dialogue with agencies. And yeah. Enrica, you have your hand raised. And also one question that I saw recently, we've heard from the agency side, but we haven't heard from the freelancer side. So I was going to ask John if you wanted to add something to the conversation, perhaps. So
let Enrica go first, and then I can say something.
Yep. So Enrica, please.
Yes, I just wanted to point out to read a couple of comments that come from freelancers, and they are both about the importance of educating freelancers as a way to empower them. This is Ignacio's comment, and Gabriela suggests to take the guidelines on collective agreements for solo self-employed by the EU Commission as a starting point. And they also, Arlene asks if FIT intends to share those ideas with the member associations. And I personally think education on that would be a very important point, at least as far as my experience in our association in Italy is. Sometimes freelancers don't even know how to negotiate terms and conditions and fair conditions to work with the agencies. So it would be really a good starting point, I think.
Thank you. And that gives me like a nice pass into what I wanted to say, because a lot of the themes that have been coming out today are things that we've been seeing like consistently in the European language industry survey over the last couple of years. This thing that Enrique just said about freelancers not feeling able to negotiate their terms and conditions. Someone in the chat said that they don't feel that they don't have agency, not in the sense of translation agency, the sense in control over their business processes, their fees, their life, their work. And this comes out quite a lot in the survey as well every single year. And I have repeatedly said that translation associations need to be doing more around this particular topic of empowering translators and teaching them negotiation skills. As Liam already said, this question around terms and conditions, we have discussed it already in the working group, and it is something that does crop up with very, very regularly every single year in the Ellis survey. Gabriella mentioned the thing about the European Commission's relaxation of the guidelines on competition law, which is to do with collective bargaining. And in some way, that is the reason why we are here today, because the process of getting those guidelines started in 2021. They were published in 2022. We've been trying ever since then to have a whole series of questions answered about how those guidelines actually apply to our sector. We tried to organize a Translating Europe workshop with funding from the European Commission, which would have been a partnership between EU-ATC and ELIA and AVTE, the audiovisual translators, and SEATEL literary translators. Like all the major big federations on both sides would have been involved in that. It wasn't approved for funding for various reasons. And so today's event is like a metamorphosis, a change in approach to try and bring up these big important questions and to discuss them, because they are, as I said at the very beginning, these are fundamental concerns that freelancers have, and a voice needs to be given to these concerns. I saw in also one of the other comments, I think it was Dimitra said, you know, why aren't we asking freelancers or giving a voice to the freelancers about how they feel unfairly treated? Well, today's event is a start in this process, I feel. And one of the things that we had discussed before with Liam was how can we, I don't know if institutionalize is the right word, but set this on a firmer foundation. Like what can we do going forward from here? Today is the start of the conversation, but what are the next steps? What can we all do together to try and make things better? Liam said it as well in the diagram, you know, what are the ideas for solutions, for improvements? And any thoughts from freelancers, from their associations are very, very welcome in this regard. And also, I think it was Arlene asked whether FIT will be sharing this. So, well, first of all, today's event is being recorded and will be available on the FIT Europe website. We will share that with EU-ATC as well, so they can share through their network with ELIA, with we will send a message to all the member associations of FIT Europe as well, so that they can share with their individual members so more people can learn about this discussion and the things that we've been talking about. And any ideas, suggestions that come up for how we can discuss these topics more closely and how we can evolve this conversation and how we can bring it further, of course, we will share with the member associations of FIT Europe.
Thank you, John. Anya.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to Laurence's comment about a lack of agency, because I think that's something that's been on my mind, and one of the main things that I think we need to shift the narrative when it comes to freelance translator feeling like they're in a I don't want to say, I don't mean it nastily when I say victim role, but I mean where you feel powerless, like if things are happening to you. And I think we need to shift much more to a role of agency where we feel we do have a power. And I very much believe that starts with actually, I'm going to quote Chris Durbin here, who apparently gave an amazing talk at the COL conference recently, who said translators need to get out of translator land and need to talk to clients. And that's very true. So we need to talk to agencies. If those are your clients, you need to talk to other translators. You need to talk to direct clients. I think we do need to raise the level of commercial awareness of the entire translation supply chain to find better ways of working together. It does start with understanding each other. Absolutely. And I just wanted to give a little shout out to Ignacio, who is in the attendees list today, because he runs a B Corp translation company in South America called Latin Lingua, and he's been so kind. I reached out to him long time ago when we were thinking of going for B Corp, and through that we've developed a great relationship to the point now where we're two really value-aligned businesses, and we will outsource to Latin Lingua, and they will outsource to us, and we found an incredibly value-aligned partner. But it all starts with a conversation. And so I just wanted to just say, like, we can't just sit and like complain about things that aren't right. There's plenty of grievances, but we all have agencies, we all have individually choices that we can make. So I think, conversations with other people is really important.
I totally agree. I was talking to Konstantin about this recently. The question is, who starts the conversation? Because it's easy to say we need to talk to each other more openly. I think perhaps we tend to forget that there is an imbalance. There's a power relationship that we have here with someone offering a job and someone taking it. Of course, you can always say, I mean, if everything's going swimmingly for you, you can reject jobs, and because you know tomorrow there'll be more work coming in. But as a principle, as I said, sharing my own experience earlier, I always feel it's my responsibility at the very outset. I'm the one asking, requesting support.
That is for everybody. I mean,
and it's my role as someone passing on that assignment to say, okay, this is what the client is paying me. Of course, if someone asks me, if one of my partners asks me, what are we going to pay? What's our take-home rate? I'm going to share that information, but I always feel it's my responsibility because I'm the one passing on the assignment. It's my client, and I'm sharing that workload. And I think that's, at least from my position, it's crucial that the person with more bargaining power is the one to start that conversation.
I would have loved to be invited to speak at the conference organized by an association of translators. This never happens. It never happens that freelancers association try and engage with us. And I think this is also a problem. And this cannot just start from companies. Otherwise, all we're saying here, it's always the companies that are behaving in a bad way. What are associations doing? I propose myself to train the freelancers to try and create these connections for free. And the practices of one of the Italian associations that might be represented here today didn't allow me to do that because it's not their practice. But this is how they stop conversations between agencies. We use freelancers, and many freelancers only work for companies because they don't want to be on social media, they don't want to market, they don't want to sell, and they don't want to go to events. But if it doesn't come from freelancers associations, there's a stop. Otherwise, there's always a complaint atmosphere, but we need to be transparent. And there's guilt on both sides. If we talk about associations, and there's guilt on both sides if we talk about companies and freelancers. Because when I tried to do that, when I tried to start that conversation, never happened. Never happened.
I totally agree. Perhaps I tried breaking up this to break up this dichotomy before. Sort of this black and white agencies, freelancers. Perhaps it's easier to speak about intermediation because I know situations where freelancers pass on work to freelancer colleagues and it's not transparent. So it's not the agency freelancer ecosystem. It's every time that anyone, whether it's an agency, whether it's freelancers sharing jobs with freelancers, that there is this need to create transparency. So I'm not trying to shift the blame on agencies. What I'm trying to say is whoever is the person passing on work, if you're the one with a client and you need the support of 3 or 4 people to get a job done, it's your role to create that responsibility. I remember presenting some of the ECG, the Economy for the Common Good principles, at a conference in Hamburg 2 or 3 years ago, and we had this debate about if my budget allows me to pay freelancers 50 hours, 50 euros an hour for revision, and someone offers to work for 40 euros, whose responsibility is it? You know, my approach would be, I'd negotiate by telling you, you can charge me 50, please charge me 50 because I can pay you 50. That's, you know, within my budget. And there was a huge discussion about why should I, you know, if someone offers me 40 euros, I'd charge them 40 euros, that's fine. And I'd keep the 10, you know, there's an extra 10 for me, good, you know. There's no right or wrong in that. All I'm trying to say is that I feel it's my responsibility as someone to passing on, whether it's an agency or whether intermediation more generally. There's a power relationship, and it doesn't matter in which constellation it happens, but we need to be aware that there is a power relationship. I think there's an imbalance, and part of creating more fairness is to create a level playing field, perhaps. Heike, please.
Thank you. I fully agree with you. The only fact is I don't see too much that that one-way power thing, huh? Because if we look at the market, and I think it's so difficult to judge generally about all this industry because it's so huge and it's so heterogeneous. Huh? So it's because almost everywhere you have text, and almost everywhere where you have text, you have translation and internationalization. So I don't see, and I'm also happy because that you emphasize on it's not just about agencies and freelancers. I think it's really about that we all consider ourselves being professionals, highly skilled professionals, and entrepreneurs. I think it doesn't matter how big your company is or isn't, or if you are self-employed. It's just the attitude you have towards the work, towards a client, towards our whole profession. And I see so many highly professional freelance translators, and I don't feel like having more power just because I'm a co-owner of a translation company. I depend on these people. And if you are specialized and you just can't widely choose in just between a lot of generalists, you really have to look who is skilled for this special work. And of course, we don't just pick. I think it's also a good sign for a translation company if we still stick with that picture of agencies. Agencies don't look for new translators for every new job. So it's really a growing partnership. And I think still going back to freelance translators and professionals, it's not that you have to develop fierce negotiation skills. I have the feeling some are really very much maybe overtrained. It's in the age of AI, it's just going back to human behavior. Just invite yourself for a coffee, because in companies or at clients, of course, you can't invite yourself for coffee at a big international corporation and client, but even this might work. But for example, agencies, you just invite yourself and enter into a discussion. Most of the companies have vendor and partner managers, and they are open to discussions. They are also open to share rates. But of course, you just don't do that publicly. Freelance translators don't do that either. I mean, I wouldn't dare ask John, what are your rates when you work for end clients? I mean, we just don't do that kind of things. But if you just sit together or just in a remote session, as Diego said, we are more than open about that. Just invite us, as you did today. Yeah, we are happy to be here. I even wouldn't have one thought not wanting to be on that panel. Yes, it's one industry. And the sooner we understand that, the better we will reach fair work conditions. And we also have them already, but we have to look where do we have difficult situations, and we have those as well. But we all, as Anja said, we have to make a choice. And this is about entrepreneurship. So, yeah.
Patrick, do you have any thoughts on the issue of well, how power is distributed along the supply chain? I mean, you've spoken with part of your research is based on speaking with freelancers. Do they feel, well, disempowered? I'm assuming they do, but what's your feedback on that?
Yeah, I guess it's very important to make a difference between sectors. So like what Heike just pointed out with these niche, highly specialized translators, for example, medical texts or legal texts, I think it might be true for some of those. But there's particular sector that we are looking at, that translations happening on platforms is very often very generic. So audio files get chunked down to 2 minutes, 1 minute, gets randomly distributed. So the person working on one part of the text doesn't know about the rest of the text. So that makes interpreting the text very, very difficult. You can see that often in the quality of the text that you get in the end. But in that case, it's hardly a way for the translators to like showcase quality, specific qualifications, and it's very, very hard to bargain with a platform. So I think we really have to differentiate between the different kind of translations we're looking at, and then we can get a sense of what the bargaining position of the translators is in these cases.
I'm just looking into the shared document, where one of the questions is, how can the silent majority be reached? I mean, that's one of the main issues. I think I know that because I'm involved in the D4D, I'm hearing from other associations, freelancer associations, that they're struggling. Before you mentioned at the UATC summit, they were, preaching to the converted, and that's one of my concerns also. I mean, how there's only a fraction of us who are organized, who have joined associations. Do you at Fair Work have any, is there a sentiment that platform workers, including especially in the translation industry, are keen to engage in, I don't know, collective bargaining, for instance?
That is for me again, right?
Yeah.
So we have that question in our service actually, and we were surprised by the big number of respondents that said yes, we would be interested in joining some kind of collective organization. But at the same time, some people are really pessimistic about what they can do. But there seems to be some motivation for people to join such efforts. And I think it can be on different levels. Like, for example, the discussion we had today about the different percentages taken by the agencies, for example. I think this could be a nice area for collective bargaining, also on a company level, on an agency level with the Works Council, or some kind of freelancers representation to just be transparent about the rates and discuss them, negotiate them. This could be a great area for negotiations, I guess. And I think this could be possible, but like the proper unions, as we know from other sectors, I think it's pretty hard. Like even like if we would think about bigger, we always focus on platforms. So people are coming from very different backgrounds. Just think about the technical difficulties in creating these elections or whatever. So I think there are some challenges, but the motivation was definitely there, and we saw that.
We're close to 6 o'clock, so I'm wondering whether we should move on. I mean, there's so many issues that I've even got on my list. We have talked about one of my favorite, not so favorite topics is algorithmic management, for instance. So talk about technology and creating control and direction, and how agency gets lost through automation, for instance. But perhaps we should move on to wrapping up and perhaps collecting a couple of points that could serve us as this very specific sort of hands-on next steps. Yeah, solutions. Where do we start?
May I will reiterate the fact that we need to talk more, and that the dialogue, the discussion can be started from both ways and should be started from both ways. And we should gather more and we should talk more about these topics. That's the starting point. We should understand each other better. I think it worked today. It was fast. We need more time. We need more events like this. But I mean, there are many ways we can work together. Again, associations, even informal lunches, or many different things we can do. And we should do that, because otherwise there's no way out.
No, definitely. As I said initially, and we were hoping that Elia would also join, and we will be engaging with them. So it might make sense to, well, definitely makes sense to have sort of a more closed, and if that is a requirement, to have, well, not at least initially not public closed conversations, to get this to move forward. Anya, you raised your hand before.
Sorry, yes, just wanted to say exactly the same thing as Jago, and also say that Ignacio posted in a comment earlier in the chat about perhaps we're at a moment where we need to think about educating freelancers as a way to empower them, education in terms of what good practices are, what it actually feels like to work in a healthy way and environment, and maybe we should tackle that as a task as a community. So I just thought that's a really lovely way of putting it. It starts with sharing, right? So happy to make those first steps and do shows and tells, learn from each other and open up a little bit, and be transparent.
I'm trying to think of sort of like I tend to switch into pragmatic mode sometimes. And I was wondering what that could look like, educating freelance. I mean, Diego said he has he put together a platform where I don't know the content, and that would be perhaps worth looking at. Yeah, shared or co-organized events with agency associations and freelancer associations would definitely be something that we could look into. I mean, Elia is initially, that's the idea behind Elia. There were agencies there and there were freelancers there. At the same time, there wasn't a lot of vetting in terms of who was able to speak. I remember one of the talks was by RWS, Trados, on their Copilot feature, and I read on LinkedIn people speaking out about the poor rates that Trados is paying people, freelancers, to train their AI, and that's something that just doesn't go together. I mean, it doesn't work. So there needs to be some kind of vetting, some kind of standards that we agree on. But at the same time, I'm aware that we as freelancer organizations, I can speak for my organization, we don't have sort of intricate vetting processes in place either. I mean, anyone who wants to become a member and proves that they are qualified becomes a member. We don't, ask about ethical practices either. So again, I think it all brings us back to creating visibility for the good agencies, like, a good agency index. I have put together a couple of ideas on that that I'd be happy to share. with Heike and with Elia, for instance. I've shared them with Patrick. That would be something that we could move forward with, for instance. John, do you have any specific ideas? I mean, we talked about providing feedback on contracts, for instance.
Yes, we've talked about it. We have the practical issues that would need to be worked out. It all comes down to the big question.
Yeah, I mean,
how would it be financed?
But
it's definitely something
exactly.
that I think it's worthwhile exploring.
You also had the idea of a platform where freelancers are able to register unpaid invoices, for instance, which is, I mean, that's an issue. I mean, it's another huge issue we haven't talked about, but yeah, in terms of practical steps.
Yes, because I saw that in America they have like a similar platform. Again, that there are lots of practical aspects about that. I have sent an email to the member associations of Europe to gather some ideas about whether they think it's feasible, any difficulties that might exist with that. I've had some feedback already about that, but we need more. We need to discuss this. We need to keep talking about it in our own working group and see whether something like that is feasible.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. I mean, there are platforms in place. I mean, there's TweetRoute, there is payment practices. Someone mentioned that in the chat beforehand.
I think so. Yes, they so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
and of course we have seen that recently there have been like a major rise in unpaid invoices, especially with companies being taken over or going bankrupt and then refusing to pay the freelancers. So there are these negative things happening in the market, which was part of the reason why we started the discussion about, you know, whether some sort of database of unpaid invoices would be useful, you know, to gather the scale of the problem in the market.
I don't know who raised their hand first, Heike or Patrick.
Heike was first.
Okay. Heike.
Thank you. Maybe a quick pragmatic offer. As EUATC, we could, for example, offer, but I don't know if it's interesting at all, small webinars about, how can you see if a translation company is a good one or not? So which questions to ask? And as you mentioned, Lime, you said
like
that you know, a freelancer who became a project manager in order to see what agencies do. And I can confirm that former project managers, because you have a lot of project managers who really, in the course of their career, decide that they really would like to refocus on translation, and then they just go out of a company and become a freelance translator. So those former project managers usually are highly successful. Why are they so successful? Because they know how the companies work and what are the needs and where do they have to enter into that process chain. So we could share that and just do small webinar nuggets about, just because, as I said, what is, you only can be fair if you know what the others do. And at least we could share this side of the medal, and then also enter into discussions. I mean, we have so many companies on board at EUATC and vendor managers, and it wouldn't, if you feel it's interesting, we just do that. Our problem is that sometimes we just don't know what is needed. And as we all have a high culture of bringing trainees out of their students' life into the professional life, we have programs which we could also share with freelancers. Not though established ones, I think they know how the market works, but then maybe to the new entries in the market, because we need them. We need definitely highly trained professionals. So I could offer that. It's very hands-on.
I very much like the idea. You could even extend that to universities offering translators degrees in translation, because my experience, at least in Germany, is that there's a gap between training at university and then, well, making that, jumping across that huge gap into freelance life itself, which is very different from what people
And actually
learn at university.
Actually, we do that already with universities, but we never focused on, you know, on the professional freelancers, because in my eyes, it might be seen as being, just because we don't see us so superior. We just do different work in the process chain. But after this discussion, I think we just could share what we do, and then everyone can take out that information and work with it. So we don't want to be pretentious, if you know what I mean. But it's just sharing our daily life.
Thank you, Heike. Patrick?
Yeah, maybe one short suggestion from the framework background. So which can be very well implemented on the sectoral level. We have that in Germany, the case of the Ombuds team that is hosted by a German union that consists of members from workers' associations and the platform side. And in case there's a conflict between cloud workers and cloud work platforms, cloud workers can turn to this Ombuds team, and that Ombuds team tries to resolve this issue. And I think this could also be something that can be done on a sectoral level between translators associations and translation agencies associations to form such a body that all the different agencies can turn to in case of conflict to implement something like an independent dispute resolution mechanism. I know this is also a matter of resources, but I think at the sectoral level, and I think we have the relevant stakeholders in the room here, this would be the right level to implement something like that could establish some kind of fair standards when it comes to terms and conditions or the complaint mechanisms or whatever.
Thank you. That sounds, very interesting. Any other suggestions? I very much like the idea of sharing resources and making a move together, because I think that's a signal that we definitely need to send out. So let me just check the chat. Yes, I agree. Keep talking about these topics as a main starting point. Sometimes, of course, there are mixed responses. I'm an established and specialized translator that even doesn't guarantee that a translation company will negotiate. We'll just have to make a move forward and see how we fare. This is a sort of trial and error situation, and but I'm extremely happy that we're making this, that we're having this conversation, and that we're actually talking about ways that we can move forward. Closing statements. Anyone who wants to go first? I can't see all of you at the moment. I don't know if anyone's raising their hand.
Well, I kind of did mine. I mean, about talking and gathering.
Yeah.
Discussing. That was my closing one.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, again.
Thank you, Diego, for being here today and for being part of the conversation. Heike.
Grateful for having been invited. Thanks. Thanks for organizing the session.
Thanks for your suggestions. We'll definitely be in touch regarding those, and yeah, we're happy to continue that conversation. John, do you have a closing statement?
I think there's a lot of food for thought after today's discussion. A lot of questions, of course, in the Q&A are unanswered. Again, like Diego said, we didn't have enough time. These things, but we probably need to lock ourselves in the room or have an all-day event talking about these things, or a 2-day event or a 3-day event to even like start thrashing out answers to these things. It's in a webinar format, it's far too short, but it's a start. And hopefully we can continue to have similar discussions and address some of the other very interesting aspects that are brought up in the questions that we weren't able to discuss today.
Yeah. I think the approach from the outset was not to sort of think that we could be answering all the questions and address all the topics, but just to have the gesture of making a start. And yeah. Anya, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for getting the conversation started. I just really hope it's the start of something that isn't, we do this once and then it's going to kind of just disappear and then we'll go back to our day job and never speak to each other again. I really hope that we can get this conversation started. And also, like you said in the beginning, Liam, is bring everyone, all of the stakeholders into the conversation. I think today was a fantastic start. What I love to see the likes of TransPerfect and Lionbridge, who didn't score so great on the Fair Work, thing, to join the conversation, because we're all part of it, right? So we can only make meaningful change if we make it together, because we're all interconnected. So I hope we can take the conversation forward and invite all of the stakeholders into future conversations.
I'm convinced our working group will do the best. I'll definitely be part of that team chasing up this conversation and staying in touch and well, yes, promoting this conversation, definitely. Patrick, do you have closing words?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank all of you for having me here and for giving me these great insights. So we are not really part of the sector. So that was, for me, it was fascinating to see how the discussion goes between the different stakeholders of the sector. And since our principles are not set in stone, they are also constantly evolving. So we are always very happy to get feedback on the principles, on the issue that the stakeholders in the sector set, to learn about how we can improve our principles and develop our principles. And for that purpose, I got a lot of good ideas. And how did you say, food for thought? So I really appreciate that, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm also looking forward to the following discussions, and I hope I can also be part of that.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. As you know, the session, we've recorded this session, so there will be a recording that we'll be sending out to everyone. I don't know if we would be sharing it publicly, John. Is there any, have we settled on any decision?
I think everyone agreed in advance that we can put it publicly on the Fit Europe YouTube channel.
Okay.
If all the speakers are happy with that, it's no problem. I see everyone nodding. So yes, it can go.
Yeah, I mean, in order to promote the biggest diffusion possible, if we can have the link as well. We have different networks of people, and translator companies don't look at the YouTube channel, unfortunately, I guess. So thank you.
Okay, so we'll be in touch. We'll be organizing future events. We'll be pursuing this conversation, and yeah, let's keep it constructive and collaborative. Thank you very, very much to all our panelists, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today.
Thank you for organizing the event. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.